All right, welcome to NFL Nexus. In the NFL, the line between being a real Super Bowl contender and just being stuck in the middle, it is paper thin. It really just takes one or two massive decisions to completely change the direction of a franchise for like the next 5 years. And honestly, right now, I don't think any team is staring down that reality harder than the Indianapolis Colts. So today, we're going to break down their absolutely huge 2026 offseason. This is a massive crossroads for them, where something like $60 million in contracts for just two guys could either launch them back into the championship picture or lock them into another year of asking what is. Okay, so to really get why there's so much pressure on GM Chris Ballard and really the whole organization, you have to look back at the 2025 season. And the word whiplash doesn't even begin to cover it. This wasn't just a good start that fizzled out. No. It was literally a tale of two seasons. It was like two completely different teams were wearing the same Colts jerseys. For about 10 games, they looked like an absolute powerhouse. And then, poof, just like that, they became one of the worst teams in the league. It was a complete and total unraveling. So let's just dig into how wild that swing really was. And look, we have to be super clear about how good they were in that first stretch. This wasn't just some lucky hot streak, all right? They looked like a legitimate juggernaut. At 8-2, they were at the top of the entire league. And they weren't just squeaking out wins either. They were winning with style. You had Coach Shane Steichen's offense, which was just humming, right? All those RPOs, those aggressive shots downfield, it was all working perfectly. The defense was solid, making big plays when they needed to. And for the first time in a while, there was a real, genuine Super Bowl buzz building in Indy. They were #1 in ESPN's power rankings. That's a spot that's only for the absolute elite. But then, the bye week hit, and the engine just completely seized up. A 7-game losing streak. That didn't just end their playoff hopes, it completely incinerated them. And if you want to see a perfect picture of how the offense fell off a cliff, just look at the numbers for their star, Jonathan Taylor. Through the first 10 games, he was on an absolutely historic pace. We're talking over 1,100 yards, 15 touchdowns. He was the literal heart and soul of that offense. He was the guy who made the entire play-action game go. But after the bye, in those last 7 games, he barely scraped together 450 yards and only 3 touchdowns. That's not a slump. That's like he became a totally different player. And it just goes to show you how the whole system just collapsed. And what was the final result of that epic collapse? Well, an 8-9 record. And for all the Colts fans watching, this is the painful part. Their 5th straight season missing the playoffs. Now, for a franchise that's used to winning, that's used to being in the mix every single year, this is just a brutally frustrating time. And you better believe that late-season meltdown has turned the heat way, way up on GM Chris Ballard and Coach Shane Steichen. This offseason isn't just about making the team better, it's about proving their whole plan can work. And for some people in that building, yeah, it might just be about saving their jobs. So, the big question is, how do you come back from that? How do you make sure it doesn't happen again? Well, from everything we're hearing, the feeling inside the Colts building is that the 8-2 team, that wasn't a fluke. They really believe that is the true identity of this team and that the only thing that derailed them was a just disastrous run of injuries. So what are they going to do? They're doubling down. They're betting that if they keep the core guys together, they can get that magic back. But running it back sounds simple, right? It's not. It's going to require them to make some of the biggest and most expensive decisions in the entire NFL this offseason, which brings us to the very first and most important piece of the puzzle. All right, Section 1, the quarterback question. And the big one is, can the Colts really commit to Daniel Jones? Because look, everything starts and ends with him. He was the absolute catalyst for that amazing 8-2 start, and he looked like a totally reborn player after coming over from the Giants. What he was doing was a full-blown career resurgence. Seriously. This is a guy who was the frontrunner for Comeback Player of the Year and was basically a lock for his first ever Pro Bowl. So you're probably asking what changed. Well, it was a perfect marriage of player and system. He was just an ideal fit for what Shane Steichen wants to do on offense, using the quarterback's legs, the RPOs, but also needing a guy who can push the ball downfield. Jones was thriving. He was making all the right decisions, creating plays out of nothing, and he was making everybody on that offense better. For the first time in years, it really looked like the Colts had found their guy, their franchise quarterback. But of course, that incredible run came to a tragic end. The injury timeline is it's brutal to even look at. First, he breaks his fibula in his left leg. Okay, bad, but you can come back from that. But then, Then he tears his Achilles in his right leg. Season over. And an Achilles tear, man, that is one of the absolute worst injuries for any athlete, but especially for a quarterback like Daniel Jones. So much of his game is built on his mobility, on having that strong base to throw from. So now this massive, massive injury is just hanging over everything. His offseason, his recovery, and yeah, his huge contract negotiation. So you'd think with an injury that big, the Colts might be a little hesitant, right? Maybe look at other options? Nope. Everything we're hearing from insiders like Jeremy Fowler at ESPN is crystal clear. The Colts are all in. Daniel Jones is their #1 priority. Fowler even says the team plans to, and I'm quoting here, turn up the heat on contract talks. So this is not a team playing it safe. They are sending a really loud message both to the rest of the NFL and to Jones himself that they believe he's going to make a full recovery and they want him back as their guy. And this, right here, is what makes this whole situation a monumental gamble. Look, the way Jones played for those 10 games, that kind of elite performance commands a huge contract. The going rate for a quarterback like that is going to start at $35 million a year, and it could easily go higher. So think about that. The Colts are about to commit top-of-the-market franchise quarterback money to a player coming off a torn Achilles. It is the absolute definition of high risk, high reward, and honestly, a move that could end up defining Chris Ballard's entire career as a GM. Okay, moving on to Section 2, the receiver's ransom, because the spending is not going to stop with Daniel Jones. Not even close. Next up on their to-do list is his #1 weapon, wide receiver Alec Pierce, who, by the way, made an incredibly smart bet on himself by playing out his rookie deal. He knew a big payday was coming, and boy, was he right. And yeah, that bet is about to pay off in a huge, huge way. Just look at these numbers. Alec Pierce has made himself into one of the most feared deep threats in the entire NFL. In 2024, he led the whole league with a crazy 22.3 yards per catch. And then, just to prove it wasn't a one-time thing, he did it again in 2025, leading the league with 21.3 yards per catch and going over 1,000 yards for the first time. This guy isn't just a good receiver, okay? He's a true game changer. His speed forces defenses to completely change their game plan. They have to play their safeties way back, which opens up the entire field for everybody else. So what's the price tag for that kind of elite, game-breaking speed? Well, it's going to be a lot. The wide receiver market has absolutely exploded over the last few years. At the very least, Pierce is looking at a deal that starts with a 2, $20 million a year. But honestly, it's probably going to be closer to $25 million a year. And a contract like that will put him right up there with the top 15 highest paid receivers in all of football. So that leads to the big question for the Colts. With a tight budget, how do they keep this guy from even hitting the open market? Because let me tell you, if he becomes a free agent, teams that are desperate for a receiver and have a ton of cash are going to be lining up to sign him. The Colts cannot afford to get into a bidding war for Alec Pierce, not after they've already committed a fortune to Daniel Jones. They just can't win that fight. So, what's their best weapon to stop that from happening? Well, it's the franchise tag. Now, if you're not familiar, the tag is basically a team's one big trump card. It's a 1-year, fully guaranteed contract that locks a player in and keeps him from becoming a free agent. Now, it is not a long-term fix, and it is crazy expensive. We're talking somewhere between $25 and $28 million for just 1 year. But here's the key. It buys them time. It gives the Colts an exclusive window to work out a long-term deal without any other teams getting in the way. And in case you're wondering if the Colts would actually pull the trigger on such an expensive move, well, we don't have to guess. There's a perfect example from just a couple of years ago. Remember Michael Pittman Jr.? They were in the exact same spot with him back in 2024. And what did they do? They used the franchise tag. And not just to keep him for a year, but as a tool to buy them time to get that long-term contract done. So yeah, we know for a fact that GM Chris Ballard is not afraid to use this move to keep his guys. Okay, on to our final section, blueprint for a rebound. Because look, even if they manage to sign both Jones and Pierce, that's still not enough. That 0-7 collapse proved one thing loud and clear. A great offense can only take you so far. They have got to fix the other side of the ball. And where do they need to start? The defensive line. They just could not get consistent pressure on quarterbacks. Now, if you just look at the total sacks, tying for 15th in the league, you might think, that's not so bad. It's average. But when you actually dig into where those sacks came from, you see the real problem. It was basically a one-man show. Their young star, Laiatu Latu, had 8.5 sacks. But after him, there was a huge drop-off. And when you only have one guy who can get to the quarterback, offenses can just scheme him out of the game. They can double team him, chip him, and suddenly your whole pass rush disappears. And guess what? That one-man show problem is about to get a lot worse, because 3 of their other main edge rushers, Kwity Paye, Samson Ebukam, and Tyquan Lewis, are all about to be free agents, and there's a real chance none of them come back. The thinking is the team wants to get younger and faster on the edge to find a true partner for Latu. But if all 3 of those guys walk, that leaves a massive hole to fill. The problem isn't just on the outside either. You look at the middle of that defensive line, and their 2 studs, DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart, are both turning 32. Now, don't get me wrong, they are still fantastic players, but in the NFL, especially in the trenches, age can catch up to you fast. That performance cliff can show up out of nowhere. So the Colts have to be smart and start planning for the future now, finding their next wave of defensive tackles before they're forced to. So when you lay it all out, the Colts have a clear 3-step plan to get back to being a contender. It's a little scary, but it's clear. Step 1, you gotta re-sign the catalyst, Daniel Jones, and just bet big that he can get back to what he was. Step 2, you have to secure your weapon, Alec Pierce. Pay the man what he's worth and use the franchise tag if you absolutely have to. And step 3, retool the trenches. Go out and get some fresh, young talent on that defensive line. Every single one of those steps is going to cost a ton of money and comes with a whole lot of risk. And that really leaves us with the big $60 million question, doesn't it? The blueprint for a Super Bowl run is right there on the table. They saw it work for 10 games. But is it actually worth the massive cost and the incredible risk? They know what they have to do to get back to the top. But actually pulling off this high-priced gamble, a plan that really all depends on one guy's Achilles tendon healing perfectly, well, that's going to be one of the biggest tests this franchise has ever faced. So, what did you think? That's our breakdown of the Colts' absolutely critical offseason. If you're into deep dives like this, please make sure you subscribe to NFL Nexus and give this video a like. And we really want to hear from you in the comments. If you were in charge, would you do it? Would you pay both of them? Let us know what you think down below. And hey, one last thing before you go. A great way to support the channel is to check out our NFL-themed coloring books. They're awesome for kids, grandkids, or hey, even for adults. There's a link right down in the description. Thanks so much for watching. We really appreciate it.